One thing about me is that I am in fact lactose intolerant. Hi, Alexi here. Welcome back to my channel, in which I scream into the void about fandom and continue to relive the 2010s in truly the worst ways possible. I've been thinking about the milkfic, and I really couldn't tell you why. Really simply could not. If you're unfamiliar, this is your chance to click away, because there is no unlearning what the milkfic is. You're still here? Oh, okay, you've been warned. Okay, great. So if you're not familiar, the milkfic is a fan fiction that was originally posted on LiveJournal, which for people that were not around for LiveJournal, low-key like myself, I am older Gen Z, it was sort of like Tumblr before Tumblr was a thing, and I know that people who actually were on LiveJournal are gonna be really mad at me for saying that, but we don't have time. It is milkfic time, okay? The milkfic was originally entitled Milk, and it was published on LiveJournal in like 2007 or 2008.
Hi, editing Alexi here. It was actually published in 2011. I don't know where I got 2000 or 2. So consumed by my milkfic related research haze that I just blacked out for a minute. But, there was a time before the milkfic and there will be a time after the milkfic. The time before the milkfic was just before 2011.
It depicts former bandmates Brendan Urie and Ryan Ross of Panic at the Disco in an unhealthy relationship, and consists of Ryan Ross being given a milk enema by Brendan Urie. By the early 2010s, the kids were like spreading it around. It was sort of like one of those chain emails that were like, forward this to 10 friends, otherwise a ghost girl is gonna turn up in your room at night and eat your face. Also, side note, as a kid that was growing up with undiagnosed OCD, those were real bad for me. Almost as bad as the milkfic. But anyways, yeah, the kids were like daring each other to read it, that sort of thing. This video originally was going to be a retrospective on shipping culture in 2010's bandom, which is like band fandom, and at least the spaces I was in was really focused on like Panic at the Disco, obviously, Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance, 21 Pilots when 21 Pilots came on the scene, like those kind of like emo pop punky bands. So yeah, it was gonna be like a cute, fun little retrospective, but then I was digging around and it turns out the author of the fic, who went by a few different names online, but they all had like Drusilla or Drew in them, was arrested for being a predator. So yeah, we'll get into that, and I'll have the appropriate trigger warnings once we get to each section, but for now, let's get into some background information. Panic at the Disco was formed in like 2004, 2005 in Las Vegas, Nevada. It consisted of vocalist Brendan Urie, Ryan Ross, Spencer Smith, and Brent Wilson, but he pretty quickly got replaced with John Walker. I watched this video recently that like really dissected the history of the band, so if you want something that's like super intense and not my quick summary, you should watch this. It's actually one of my favorite pieces of fandom and music journalism. But to summarize, they recorded a few demos in high school. Pete Wentz of the already massively successful band Fall Out Boy got his little hands on them, and he got Panic a record deal pretty soon after, before the band had even played a live show. As Brendan Urie sings in Local God, off of the 2023 record Viva Las Vengeance, signed a record deal at 17, hated by every local band. They said we never paid our dues, but what does that mean? When money never changes hands. 2021 and I'm almost famous, but you never really cared about that. You know, 11 people have writing credits on that album, and yet it's so bad. So Panic at the Disco's first record, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, did crazy well in the charts, and if you clicked on this video and then you stayed past my "the milkfic will traumatize you" warning, yeah, you'll probably have a visceral reaction to this. You're welcome. So Panic then released another album, Pretty Odd, which was very different vibe-wise, but still contained hits like 9 in the Afternoon and Northern Downpour, the latter of which probably thousands of depressed teens have played in their bedrooms at unholy hours, crying about their queer codependent relationship with their middle school best friend. At least, I'd assume. There had been some behind the scenes tensions for a while, so the band actually split in half after Pretty Odd, with Brendan Urie and Spencer Smith keeping the Panic name in the divorce, and Ryan Ross and John Walker forming the Young Vanes, who actually sing my intro and outro song. Thank you guys for having really chill copyright requirements. Eventually, Spencer Smith left the band, and Brendan Urie continued performing under the Panic name until 2023. So, some people think/thought that a large part of why Panic split after Pretty Odd was because Brendan Urie and Ryan Ross were in a secret gay relationship, that they had had a secret messy gay breakup, and therefore they could just no longer be in their not very secret, a little bit gay band. The main evidence for this that I remember was that they had kissed on stage at least once, and that Brendan is openly bisexual. The song Girls, Girls, Boys set us back years as a society. Anyways, the combo of the two of them kissing on stage and being two allegedly attractive cis white men led to people shipping them, which is like pairing them in a relationship, and writing a lot of fan fiction about them. Honestly, by the time I started reading Bandom RPF, which stands for Real Person Fanfiction, because all these people are, for better or for worse, real, I think more people were writing fic shipping Brendan Urie and Dallin Weekes, because Dallin was the lead guitarist during the Death of a Bachelor tour that was going on at that time, which I think I actually went to. I'll see if I can find a picture of me at that tour. Anyways, a similar Brendan Urie kissed him on stage situation. He went on to start I Don't Know How But They Found Me, which is actually a really great band in my personal opinion. I think he said some stuff in a way that's much more classy than I could ever personally conjure up at any point in my life, that implied that he didn't love working with Brendan, which, like, yeah, fair enough. I think there was some infighting on who Brendan Urie should be shipped with, but I honestly was never all that invested. But yeah, tangent, that was really just an excuse to plug IDK How aside. People were shipping Brendan Urie and Ryan Ross, which led to some very good fanfiction, at least by my like middle, early high school standards, and also the milkfic. Trigger warning, I will be describing a bit of the fic in this part. It doesn't get too graphic, but there's more description than your average Brendan gives Ryan Ross a milk enema. There's also discussion of emotional abuse in this fictionalized relationship. Skip to this timestamp if you want to skip this section, which is completely understandable for a variety of reasons. Here's some live footage of me reading the milkfic for the first time in like probably a little less than 10 years. And hopefully the last time. I can't believe Gerard Way called this prose good. Great. Oh, it's warm milk. You know when something's written from third person, but it's mostly like one person's like thoughts and POV? It's mostly bestie Ryan Ross's POV, but in the third person sense, God bless him. But it did just randomly jump to Brendan. I am gonna just read this line. Don't sound so disappointed. The boy chatted softly. Something that is not safe for work that involves preparation. He almost added a soft slut but stopped himself. We jumped from like Ryan's third person POV to Brendan Urie's, and it's like, I don't know, just felt very jarring that suddenly we have Brendan Urie almost calling Ryan Ross a slut. There's the line, he usually didn't tell Ryan how much he'd taken, so I guess they do this. Oh boy. 8 minutes left. Fucking hell. Yeah, this is actually as bad as I remember, guys. We're done. So to summarize, basically, Brendan Urie gives Ryan Ross a 2-quart milk enema. From my brief research, that's very much on the upper end of the amount of liquid you should use for an enema. Solutions used for enemas should be like 90 degrees Fahrenheit, so it being warm unfortunately does make sense. Also from my brief research, milk enemas are on the riskier end of homemade enemas, and it's better to use a pre-made solution that you like buy at a store that would be saline, so like water and salt, because then you'll know it's sterile. Brendan and Ryan's relationship is pretty clearly unhealthy, with Ryan telling Brendan to stop like twice and Brendan just ignoring him. That's great. I would say the two are in a BDSM relationship, with Brendan being more of like the dom. I personally have not been in a BDSM relationship, but like a safe word is never mentioned in this fic, and I feel like if Brendan Urie and Ryan Ross, as written in the milkfic, were in a healthy BDSM relationship, the stoplight system with red for stop, yellow for pause, and green for keep going should have been employed in this scene. If you want more content on BDSM from someone who is actually in like BDSM spaces and kink spaces, like Cat Black makes content for introspective hot people. There's also other mentions of Ryan being pressured by Brendan into sexual acts that he is not comfortable with. For some reason, Pete Wentz catches strays in this. The fic ends with them having penetrative sex and Ryan fantasizing about them being a normal couple. Someone get fictional Ryan Ross out of there. As I alluded to in footage of me reading, Gerard Way of My Chemical Romance has read the milkfic. I came across these tweets from them when I was in high school and I thought they were doctored, but like no, he's really read it. Dan and Phil, who also unfortunately have some pretty messed up fic written about them, they've read it.
Excuse me? What are we doing? Recreating the milkfic or something?
No!
And Brendan Urie is at the very least aware of it.
My milkfic brings all the girls to the net, and they're like, it's making me wet. Damn right, it's making you wet. You spent all your time surfing on the net, girl. I'm just kidding, but I know about it.
God, he annoys me. If I were gonna do a literary analysis of this as somebody with an English degree, I think the combination of the usage of milk as an enema, Ryan Ross describing his stomach swelling and later the release of the milk, and the proliferation of milk enemas in their relationship symbolizes Ryan attempting again and again to birth a mutual attachment and respect, a normal coupling. Just kidding, the author's just fucking weird. Huge trigger warning for discussions of inappropriate relationships with minors in this section. I don't go into details, but it's still upsetting content, so go to this timestamp if you do want to skip it. Again, really understandable. I do also want to, preface by saying I don't think that everyone who writes darker content secretly wants that content to happen to them or another person or people. And fanfiction is a place for people to explore kinks that are more stigmatized in the mainstream, like rape fantasies and piss kink or even milk enemas. Sometimes people want to write their favorite character or band member really, really unhappy as well. There's literally a tag for it on Archive of Our Own, which is a fanfiction hosting website. Dead dove do not eat, which like basically means other tags are exactly what happens in this fic. It contains dark content. It comes from this scene in Arrested Development.
I don't know what I expected.
I'm bringing this all up because I think it's important to note that writing an abusive dynamic like that scene in the milkfic does not mean that an author is abusive in real life. That said, the author of the milkfic specifically, who again went by Drusilla or Drew in fandom circles, just straight up is. So in 2017 or so, a Tumblr user came forward explaining that they had met Drusilla on fandom website Miba. I'm sorry if it's Miba. It was just a little bit too early for me. So this Tumblr user met Drusilla on that website when they were 12. Drew was really popular on there. At that time she was 20 and she groomed this Tumblr user into a sexual relationship. Said relationship was also extremely emotionally abusive. Drew used the fact that her fiance had broken up with her as part of her strategy to lure this Tumblr user in. The fiance was 16, by the way. Drew eventually moved in with the Tumblr user as the user had a pretty chaotic home life, and this of course made the abuse even worse. The user's father eventually found out, and that led to Drew being arrested. She did spend some time in jail, but the user didn't want to testify at a trial for a variety of reasons, so Drew never went to prison and moved on to other fandoms. Here's her mugshot. I don't want to go into much more detail because the Tumblr user deleted their post. Another Tumblr user made a post about everything in 2021, so a couple of years later. That's also been deleted, as has a Reddit post that summarized all of this. They are all real though. I've read them and I know what I'm about to say is hypocritical, but they've been removed for a reason, and I discourage people from seeking them out. The most recent content I could find from an account associated with Drusilla is from like 2018. It was mostly Fall Out Boy related at that point, as she'd moved on from the Panic fandom after Brendan Urie called her fic disgusting, and she got pissed about it. Girl, I think you're disgusting. For once, Brendan Urie and I agree on something.
Do I know what the milkfic is? Yeah. It's a terribly sad, disgusting story. It's sad people want to latch onto. And that's fine. Be sad, you know? Latch onto a fiction. That's what everybody does, right?
Despite being the author of such an infamous fic, she was still pretty popular in the Fall Out Boy fandom, actually, even though people knew she like wrote the milkfic, it was in her Tumblr. And it feels super hollow and stereotypical to say this, but the fact that the Tumblr user came forward takes this bravery that I think is hard to state, and also maybe hard to understand if you weren't in fandom spaces at that time, especially like fandom spaces at that time. They came forward at a time where Drusilla was really popular and held a lot of power in a space that like contained a fair number of people but was also like really close-knit. They were also the age that I currently am when they came forward. There are just like huge problems with grooming and adults exploiting minors in fandoms, and I think fandom culture, and especially fandom that engaged in RPF, was really marginalized for so long that people felt like they couldn't criticize it at all for like having a racism problem or having these issues with grooming and adults taking advantage of minors. And we're finally starting to talk about that more, which is a good thing. And even though the post is now deleted, I do think it is partially because this person did come forward. So yeah, I just hope they're doing well now, is what I would say. I think that the element of the milkfic that has always most disturbed me was how viscerally the relationship between Ryan and Brendan is described and how abusive it is. And how brainwashed Ryan is as well as like an element of that. I think a lot of people that dared their friends to read it thought it was shock fic, which fanlore defines as a trope of fanfiction in which writers publish stories deliberately meant to disturb, horrify, or squick the reader. Squick is sort of like give the ick. And while the milkfic now functions as shock fic, in large part because of the deviant sexual behavior in it and the gratuitous descriptions of a milk enema, I think it's worth it to note that it was written seriously and that the author was mad when it wasn't taken seriously, and also there's a sequel. I don't know how like culturally relevant the milkfic is anymore. It seems like it's not, but it also could be because I'm not in those fandom spaces anymore. So I don't feel like I quite have to be like, stop joking about the milkfic, the author is a predator, but like at the same time, I don't personally feel like joking about the milkfic anymore. Also, side note, Drusilla's stepdad ran for state legislator, and Drusilla's mom's ex-husband, who she was married to between being married to Drusilla's dad and the state legislator guy, tried to extort state legislator guy / Drusilla's stepdad, in the end with explicit images of Drusilla and her mom, not together, like they were separate images. But at first he tried to use Drusilla's arrest for soliciting a minor as a way to extort the dad, and he got convicted of cyber stalking, which is just kind of like a really wild connection. Anyways, I'd love to do another video on like famous fandom RPF, like the Forest fic or something that gets more into like the implications of RPF. Like I just read a paper that compared how people write RPF to biopics that was super interesting. I also think it's interesting that we can trace a lot of these conversations about like fan fiction becoming more mainstream and books that were originally fan fiction, like 50 Shades of Grey, which was Twilight fan fiction. I think that's not as common knowledge anymore, to the phenomenon surrounding the milkfic in some ways. Like, hear me out here. As someone whose other interest is Hermione, which is Draco/Hermione from Harry Potter books, and mainstream interactions and marketing with fandom spaces, it's super interesting to me that the milkfic kind of like breached containment and was being read by celebrities way back in 2013. Like, more recently, right, people are giving bound copies of Harry Potter fan fiction like Manacled, which then became the book Alchemized, to actors like Tom Felton, which, like, I don't like Tom Felton, who's the guy that played Draco Malfoy and like cannot let go of having been Draco Malfoy. Like, dude, calm down, just live on your fucking transphobe, racist, universe ladies royalty checks, okay? Jesus Christ. But like, even if I don't like him, it does have to be pretty violating to be handed fanfiction of a character you played repeatedly sexually assaulting a character your coworker played. And over a decade ago, Brendan Urie was just like making vines about sort of like a similar concept.
No, I'm wasting my time on fanfic. That's for fans. You guys can read that shit.
Yeah, that's our fiction.
Yeah, I don't care about that shit.
We're not doing that. Hey, Brendan, do you have any notes?
The 50 Shades movie actually came out in 2015, which I think is when people started talking more about it being formerly fan fiction. And I think it's interesting to think about the milkfic, which again gained a lot of popularity and had a lot of people talking about it in like the early 2010s, as one of the first time fan fiction escaped fandom spaces, especially now that it's a pretty common and even purposeful occurrence. But also, like, the writer sucks. And I hope that Drusilla/Danielle Selders is having a very bad day. Thank you so much for watching. My intro song is Take a Vacation by the Young Vanes, as is my outro song. Pour one out for Ryan Ross. What else? You can email me at aluciasonline@gmail.com, which will be in the description box and will also be on the screen probably. Like, comment, and subscribe. I really like responding to comments. I love it when people comment because I love to talk and I love to talk to people, and comments are my ability to talk to people online. It's very, very great. But yeah, thanks for watching, I guess. This one was just kind of like a weird one to format, but I'd like to do some lighter-hearted looks at other famous fandom RPF. Yeah, take a vacation. Go touch grass, everybody.